In this section, I'm going to look at some basic SEO terminology. Now, the first question is, what is SEO? What is search engine optimization? Well, as I'm sure you know, SEO is a collection of techniques, and the basic goal is to promote your website within the search engine results. Now, there's two types of SEO. There's what's called on-site SEO. So on-site SEO is basically everything you do within your website. So it's to do with, your titles and your headings and your keyword text and alt tags and anchor text and a whole load of other things. So it's basically everything you do on your website. Off-site SEO is basically you do everything outside your website. So it's to do with getting links from other websites, and it's to do with using social media, things like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and so on. So these days, good SEO is a mixture of on-site and off-site SEO techniques. Now, the other thing you need to make sure you understand is the difference between organic results and paid for or pay-per-click search engine results. Now, normally when you search for something, you get up to 4 adverts displayed at the top, and these are what are called pay-per-click adverts. The only reason they're displayed there is because somebody paid to have them displayed there, and it's basically an auction system, so the more you pay, the higher up in the paid results section you'll get. It's very important to realize there's no connection between the paid for results and the organic results. Some people think that if you sign up for a Google account and actually run an advertising campaign, this is going to help your organic SEO, and Google are categorical about this. There's no connection between the two. So in this course, we'll be talking about how to get organic SEO results that don't cost anything, as I said, and that's totally different from the paid for adverts you see at the top of the search results. Now, something that bothers a lot of people is they've heard that Google is constantly making changes to its algorithm. The word algorithm just means formula, by the way. Google has about 200 factors it takes into account to determine who comes first, who comes last in search engine results. Now, don't get obsessed by the daily changes that Google makes, because the daily changes are tiny little changes to one thing or this, that, or the other. Every so often, Google will release an upgrade, and it basically lumps a whole load of changes together. Now, if you do good SEO, you don't have to worry about changes to the algorithm, because if you think of it from Google's point of view, why does it change the algorithm? Basically, it's trying to catch out the scammers, the cheats. So if you do good SEO, you don't have to worry about what changes Google might make in the future. I mean, as I've mentioned before, I've been doing SEO for over 20 years now, and I've never been adversely affected by anything that Google has changed. So as it says in about the 4th bullet down there, don't get obsessed about, learning the last sort of minutiae of every sort of change that Google makes. As I say, it makes changes every single day. They're on record as saying that quite often they try things out, just little things. So they might try something out. If that improves their results, they'll keep it. If it doesn't improve the results or makes no difference, then they won't keep it. So, as I say, play by the rules, and you don't have to worry about the changes to the algorithm. Now, this is a page from Google's own website. You can see the address up the top there, and it's basically entitled How Search Algorithms Work. It's kind of obvious in a way. I mean, there's a couple of different sections here. This page talks about analyzing your words. So really what Google is saying here is that you need to have your keywords actually within the body text of your website. The keywords should be sort of enclosed in natural sounding sentences. You don't want just a whole list of keywords. That would have worked years ago, but now it looks like spam. So as I'll mention numerous times in this course, what Google is looking to reward is good quality content, well-written content, and ideally pages that have, a fair amount of content on each page. As you can see, there's different tabs here. If I click on where it says Matching Your Search, there's more information here. So as it says, basically, we, Google, look for pages with information that match your query. When you search at the most basic level, our algorithms will look at the search terms in the index to find the appropriate pages. They then analyze how often and where these keywords appear on the page, whether it be in your titles, headings, or in the body text. So, just that bit there is a pretty strong clue of what Google thinks is important, which is why we'll talk in detail about titles, headings, and body text. Next, you've got this bit about ranking useful pages. As it says, when you run a query, there might well be millions of pages that vaguely match the results. And what Google is trying to do is to help rank the best pages so they appear at the top, and evaluate how these pages are useful for people. Again, if you just sort of browse through this, it talks about the freshness of the content, i.e. newly created pages or newly edited pages, the number of times your search appears, and whether the page has a good user experience. What that means is that if lots of people go to your website, look at it for 2 seconds, then go back to the search results, that's a pretty clear indication to Google that people don't like your page, or that the page doesn't match up what people were searching for. It also says if other prominent pages on the particular subject link to the page, then that's a good sign that this is high quality. So there it's talking about links from other websites. Here it's talking about considering the context. So if people are doing local searches, for instance, if they're doing a search for, say, SEO companies in Sydney, and you have the words SEO companies in Sydney all in the page, then that's going to help you. Now, when you're doing your SEO, you want to think about what you want to achieve, and you also want to think local. Certainly when you start doing your SEO, try thinking locally first and then expand, to maybe the sort of city and then the country. The other thing, as I've said, is try and be realistic. I mean, I still get people ringing me up and saying, oh, I've got a plumbing company and I want it so that when anyone anywhere in Australia types in the word plumbers, I want to come up first all over Australia, which is kind of crazy. I mean, that's very, very difficult to do and of limited use. If you're a small company, maybe a small plumbing company based in Perth, then you want really customers in Perth, not Sydney, unless you're a multinational company. So you should definitely think local. I mean, instead of words like plumbers, plumbing, commercial plumbers, things like that, what you want is, for instance, if you're based in Joondalup, to initially try and rank for phrases like plumbers in Joondalup, or plumbing Joondalup, or commercial plumbers Joondalup, something like that. So I say start local and then expand out. Now, ROI is return on investment. Properly applied SEO gives a fantastic return on investment. You think what you'd have to pay advertising in a newspaper, on the radio, or the television, and compare that with what you pay for a website. Actually running a website, hosting and the domain name, it's a tiny amount of money really compared to traditional advertising. And with just a little bit of effort with your SEO, you can get enormous return on that investment. So really, if you're going to do your own SEO, your investment is time rather than money. As I've already indicated, you don't actually have to spend that much time doing the SEO. So, it's a great alternative to traditional advertising. Another phrase I have mentioned before, black hat versus white hat SEO. White hat SEO basically uses techniques that Google approves of that are outlined in the Google Webmaster Guidelines. Black hat techniques, on the other hand, use underhand techniques and try and artificially boost the position of a web page within the search results. As I've already mentioned, using black hat SEO may get you short-term success in the search engine results, but in the longer term, if you're not really careful, you could be demoted, or even worse, you could be actually banned from Google. A famous case quite a few years ago now was BMW in Germany, and at one point Google completely banned them because apparently they had used a third-party company working on their behalf, and this company was using techniques that Google disapproved of. And this happens every year. Google will basically take a pot shot at a large multinational company just to make the point. So if it can happen to these big companies, it can certainly happen to you. So as I've mentioned numerous times already, stick to the rules. Don't try and game the system. Now, another phrase you're going to come across is robots, spiders, and crawlers. They're all basically the same thing. They're little bits of software that the search engines send out to sort of crawl the web, to find websites and to follow links from one website to another, or to find links between one page and another page within a website. So in the case of Google, the little robot is called Googlebot, and it just happily sort of spends its time trawling through all the pages on the internet, going from link to link to link, and it reports back to Google, and then Google builds up a sort of index of, a particular page, what that page is about, and then it can use that to serve up that particular page in the search engine results. So another phrase you hear is domain name or URL. URL is actually short for Uniform Resource Locator, if you really wanted to know. And in the case of Microsoft, the URL will be www.microsoft.com. So, as it says, in many ways, the URL is similar to a sort of telephone number. It's the address of the website. Once people know the URL, they just simply type that into the address bar within a web browser, press enter, and they can view the website. Now, what is an IP address? Well, the IP address is essentially the number, the technical number that sort of lurks under the URL. So human beings, people tend to use URLs, whereas the computers use the IP address. You can easily look up an IP address. There's this website here. It's www.site24x7.com. So within this website, as I say, it's called Site24x7. If I type in an address like www.cctglobal.com, which is one of my websites, if I just click on where it says Find IP, you can see here that number there is the IP address. So as I say, you don't really have to understand exactly what IP addresses are. It's a term you might well come across. And as I said, just think of it as the number underlining the URL. It's the IP address is what computers use. URLs is what people use. That's it, basically. Now, finally, what is a web server? A web server is just an ordinary computer. I mean, your laptop could be a web server if you wanted to. You just put some special software on it, and it's connected permanently to the internet. And once it's been set up, then you can store websites on it, so you can have lots and lots of websites on the same computer if you wanted to. How it all works technically, it's not really important. It doesn't matter, because in most cases you'll be using probably a shared server, so your hosting company will just simply set up your particular website on their web servers.